To this now, Britain's Queen Elizabeth II's coffin is on its final journey from Westminster Abbey to Windsor Castle, with huge and silent crowds lining the route. The massive procession involving 3,000 military personnel is marching past many of London's most famous landmarks. Now, a funeral service was held at Westminster Abbey, the building in which the Queen was married and also crowned. Hundreds of dignitaries attended the funeral, including world leaders. Now, we are joined via Zoom by author and commentator Victor Kgomoeswana just to discuss the life and the legacy of Queen Elizabeth. Victor, thank you so much for staying on to the channel. And of course, today, a lot of people saying that, you know, the Queen needs to be celebrated. This is a time to mourn her loss, but mixed reactions coming out from the African continent, and mostly rightfully so because of the colonial history. Talk to us about how should Africans treat this day particularly?
Good day, Unati. Good to see you again. Yes, when you are at a funeral, you cannot trash the deceased. And definitely the Queen Elizabeth II was a dignified woman. No question about that. She was royalty. She was an elegant human being. I'm sure if she had been my grandmother, I would be mourning right now, and therefore I can never go out and be insensitive to the fact that there are people who hold her in high regard and will continue to hold her in high regard. But that's Queen Elizabeth II. Her Majesty, may she rest in peace. But hang on a second. She is the empire. She was the empire. To me as an African, she was the same empire that failed to honor the Lancaster House Agreement and eventually Zimbabwe went the route that it went. She's the same empire that took care of Kimberley mines and took all the diamonds out and left a big hole there and a lot of poverty. I'll remember the kingdom for all that happened in all the British Commonwealth nations and countries, and how hard people had to fight to get independence. And even after they got independence, continued to just be the subject of an empire that didn't seem to be able to give anything back to them. So that legacy, unfortunately, until and unless it is fixed, plus the fact that slavery was something that the Brits were very much behind, although it's not as she originated the slave trade, until the legacy of that kind of slave trade, colonial repression, and all kinds of exploitation, until that legacy is eliminated and replaced by human dignity and socio-economic justice. Unfortunately, we can't speak of her and not mention that which the empire stood for on the African continent.
It does then become very problematic, Victor, if you look at how, you know, the current leadership in the African continent is then treating her and choosing to remember her when many are echoing what you are currently saying now. I mean, you talk about the Lancaster Agreement and her role or lack thereof in Zimbabwe, and yet you had the Zimbabwean president Mnangagwa issuing out this statement that praised her and her reign. And we know what happened in Kenya, and we also know what happened in other African countries, and yet you have these world leaders at her funeral. Are we taking almost like a blind loyalty, a blind celebration of her life when we know that there were so many things that she could have done during her reign?
Honestly, Unati, that's why maybe I'm not a diplomat and I'm not a politician. And at the same time, I should say, maybe if I had been at the funeral of Her Majesty the Queen, I wouldn't also be able to say what I'm saying, purely because the decorum and the somber mood at that occasion would not allow me to say that. Because remember, I would have been joining the funeral to support the royal family, the British people, the United Kingdom. So I couldn't possibly be saying what I'm saying. I'm speaking as an African, as an observer, as a commentator, as a thinker, as an author, somebody who has read and observed and experienced the impact of the kingdom. So I couldn't possibly blame the leaders who are at the funeral, because you don't go to a funeral and say, yeah, serves you right. And I'm not even saying it serves you right. I'm just saying, unfortunately, after she's gone, she can't fix anything. Let's hope that Prince Charles, now King Charles III, will do some of the work that she could and should have done to correct or undo the damage of the British Empire all over the African continent and all over the world.
You talk of course, King Charles III. Let's talk about his role, particularly as it speaks to just, the mixed reactions that we've been seeing about the Queen's legacy and her reign. Of course, calls are growing in this country for her and the British royal family, that is, to return the world's largest diamond that we know, that was taken from South Africa. Of course, the royal family saying that it was gifted to her, but we obviously understand the history and know that there is more to it than that. Is it enough to expect, for instance, King Charles III to do that, to return some of those treasures that have been stolen, not only in South Africa, but in other African countries? Should we expect more from him, like an apology maybe?
No, reparation. I could do without an apology if he fixes the mess. Hey, Unathi, if I am serving you as the Queen and I'm in a foreign country and I discover a large stone and I'm the governor of that whatever province or whatever it is, and I send it back to you, yes, I'm an illegitimate government, and I'm sending something as a gift back to you. That's fine. But to the African people, that was not a gift. I'm not talking about just diamonds. I'm talking about what is in the British Museum and other European museums. I'm talking about the unkept promises and the fact that to date, the trade between the UK and Africa remains one-sided. The trade deficit is just too wide. We are exporting whatever we are exporting raw, we are importing whatever we are importing expensive and processed. If at least King Charles III could say, okay, I would like to fix this. I would like to correct the trade deficit. I would like to find a way of taking some of the money that was made using African wealth and riches to correct and create tertiary industries on the African continent. I would like to find what we can do to undo the social impact, the psychosocial damage that was done, and restore some socio-economic justice. Then I would feel good. But to simply say it was gifted, it wasn't a gift. It was something taken by the Brits, given to the head of the empire. So that wouldn't be my definition of a gift.
Victor Kgomoeswana, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure speaking to you. Victor is an author and is also a commentator, particularly of the African continent. As you can see, those visuals there by your screen, Queen Elizabeth's coffin is on its final journey from Westminster Abbey to Windsor Castle, with huge and silent crowds lining that route. We'll continue to give you developments from this story.